So, more on Fernwood tonight. So tell us about Jerry Hubbard. Who was he?
Jerry Hubbard was the character who had been born and raised in this little town of Fernwood. And I guess his history was he played a host of children's shows, and he was kind of a beloved character there in town, kind of a dim-wit. And Barth Gimble, Martin's character, was this flashy guy who'd been brought in from Miami. I guess he'd been kicked out of Miami for some kind of scandal, and he took over the show. He was kind of the Sharpie, the city guy. And so that was our teaming up there.
What were Jerry's strengths and what were his weaknesses?
I think Jerry's strength was he would say anything that came to his mind, and I think a lot of people related to that. He would say anything he was thinking. You know, he didn't hold anything back. He didn't have any grudges. He would, if he got mad and pouted, it would just be for a few seconds, and then he'd open up again. He would say what people were thinking. He would ask questions that people might be thinking, but say, "Oh, you shouldn't answer that, or you shouldn't ask that question." That's the only thing I could think of was his strength.
And what about his weaknesses?
Well, his weaknesses, he would say the obvious a lot of times, and he would say dumb things. One of the best things, Martin's character would, when I'd go on and on, he'd say, "Oh, look, Jerry," and point over there, and I'd look, and I was left looking for something. So he wasn't that bright, but he was kind of a lovable character.
And how were you like him, and how are you different from him?
I'm completely opposite. I hold things in more, and I don't say, you know, if I'm at a group of people, I'll just sit back and observe everyone, which I think a lot of actors do. And the worst part of any evening is that someone says, "Boy, Fred, you're awful quiet." And I say, "Oh, don't do that to me." But Jerry never had that problem. He would just speak out. And it's a good thing to have whatever came to his mind. There was no block between a thought that came to his mind and something came out of his mouth.
Do people expect you to be that? You said that people say, "Oh, you're being quiet." Do people expect you to be that character?
I think they do. They think me to. And I can be very, very talkative if I'm with close friends, if I feel comfortable with people. If I'm in a show business crowd, I can be very, very comfortable. A lot of times my wife will say to me, "Fred, hold it down, you're a little loud." But if I'm with a lot of people that what we call civilians, you know, who will say to me, "Well, so what do you do with all your free time?" You know, or what shows have you been on? I never watched television. Then it gets uneasy.
Understandably. Did Jerry evolve at all over the course of the show, or do you think he...
Yeah, my character got much freer, and I got more easy to ad-lib or say things that popped into my mind, or go off on a long streak on something. I always remember it was one show. I remember what exactly was happening, but we had a bust of someone's head that you took off the top and it was filled with chocolates, and I went into a whole thing riffed on the chocolates. I put it on my shoulder. I think at the time there was a movie called The Man with Two Heads, and I did a few minutes on that. And it just built and built and built, and it kind of freed up my character to just say and do almost anything.
And did he become that way because you had become that way?
Probably. I stopped thinking about, should I say this, and I just said, if I say it and it doesn't work, they'll just cut it.
Talk a little bit about Jerry's wardrobe on the show.
Well, an important thing about that, at the time, if you look back at it now, it was kind of cheesy, but at the time it was some good clothes, and I think it would have been a mistake to dress him shabbily. At the same time, there was a show called WKRP, and a fellow who became a good friend of mine, Frank Bonner, played the character, and they had him in loud stripes and checks and cheap things, which was, I think he said they did that deliberately to set him apart because his character was kind of like mine. But I dress kind of well, and I think anytime you see a character dressed nicely on TV, you like him a little better. And I think that was a good. It was a good choice for the producers to dress me in some nice clothes.
How did people you mentioned the cab driver in New York, but how were people responding to you on the street? Did they like Jerry?
They loved Jerry. Yeah. how are you, Jerry? And to me, they'd all say, where's Happy Kine? And Martin said when they saw him, everyone would say, hey, where's Jerry Hubbard? And I was working at the time in the group called the Ace Trucking Company. We were still doing shows. And we worked up at the place called the Hungry Eye the boarding house in San Francisco. And I got a call when our date was over from the guy who owned it. And he said, Fred, all these people came to see you because you're Jerry Hubbard on this show. They want to know when you're going to do your own stand-up act. I said, well, I don't really do that. He said, I'd really like you to do that and come up. We'll book you. What we'll do, we'll book you on an open-end run. I said, oh, geez. He said, well, we did that to Steve Martin. He came up and he played a couple of months. And I said, well, I don't have an act. He says, well, work on it, would you? So he called me every few weeks. Are you working on the act? So finally I said, okay. I worked on a whole bunch of stuff to do. Now, Martin Mull already had his own stand-up act, and he was very popular. So I said, well, heck, I should cash in on this. So I suddenly decided to do some music, too. And someone recommended me. I got a phone call from a guy who said, Fred, I understand you need a group. I have this group. We've played with all these rock and roll performers. I'd love to work with you. So I got together. There were 4 of them, and that was my group. There were four musicians and myself. They would do the opening of the show. They'd do about 20 minutes. They'd introduce me. I would come out. I would do my act. I would turn to the band. I'd say, guys, you can stay on. You're welcome to stay on. I'm going to do some of that humor I do, and I know you like it. Or if you want to, you can go back and sit in the dressing room. And they'd look at each other and put down their instruments and go back and sit in the dressing room.
Did you sing original songs? Or?
I wrote a couple of songs that I wrote, and then I did a couple of old rock and roll songs that I loved. I did One Night with You from Elvis Presley. I did a couple of other things, and I really had fun because in the back of my mind, I always loved some of these songs, and I would do them, and I'd have some funny things. My guitarist was wonderful. I would ask him, I would say, do a little, Chuck Berry, and he would do da na 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 na. He would just, it'd sound like Chuck Berry. And the act got very popular. We played at the boarding house, and I hated it. And the first night I went in, and I walked through, and the place was packed. And I said to my wife, I said, oh no, I don't want a packed house. I wanted just, 15, 20 people to break in the stuff. I didn't even have 2 acts. And I said, I don't know what to do. I had to do 2 shows, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I did the first act, and I said, I don't know, what should I do? Then I just made up stuff the second act. And the next day I came in, and I'd gotten a review. It said, a star is born at the boarding house. And my wife said, did you see that? I said, oh no, now they're going to want me to do it again. And I looked back and I kicked myself. I didn't realize that they would appreciate anything I did, my audience. And so I came up with some pretty funny stuff, and we traveled around. When I say cash in on it, there's no cashing in because I paid the band as much as I could. I just thought they were so great. And we went to Chicago. We traveled all around. We do club dates, and went to New York. And I had a whole lot of fun doing it. And I still get up and I do stand-up occasionally. Right. And if I have to host something or I do a benefit, I'll bring out some old material or write some new material. And so it was a good proving ground, good training thing.
That's great. On Fernwood, you said the fans loved you in the show. What did the critics think of the show?
I think everyone loved it. We had one very funny thing. Tom Snyder, the old talk show host, came out and said he didn't care for it. He said, I think it looks like a real bomb. So Martin Mull picked up on that. He said, at this time, when we're talking about our nuclear capabilities, is the word bomb. It was wonderful. So Tom Snyder had me on, he had Martin on, and he did a 180-degree turnaround. He just ended up loving the show. But everyone loved it from the beginning. Everyone thought it was a great show because it was new. And they've tried to do that since then, spoofs of talk shows. And it doesn't work, and I'll tell you why. you watch it and they tip their hand. They let you know they're being funny. I think we tried to make it as real as we could. And there's a story that I love to think is true, that Ringo Starr loved the show. And someone said, Ringo, would you like to be on it? He said, oh, yeah, but I don't want to bloody go all the way to Fernwood, Ohio, take a plane and a bus. He thought it was really done there. So that was really great.
That's amazing. Did any of you said it wasn't a parody of The Tonight Show, no. But did anybody like Carson or any of the other the real talk shows of the time, ever take issue with the show?
I never heard any feedback from the real talk shows, no. No, I didn't. So I don't know whether, I'm sure, I didn't know a hey-oh or anything like that. It was no competition. We weren't making fun of anyone at the time.
Ed McMahon never called you.
No, I got not to know Ed McMahon. He talked to me years later when I was doing sketches on the Tonight Show. We were at a NATB convention in New Orleans, and he came up to me, told me what a wonderful job I was doing. I was so flattered. I said, geez, Ed, just to think you're watching and seeing me, thank you. But the Tonight Show and all those shows, the Tonight Show, Johnny Carson, we never talked to Johnny Carson. We never talked to Ed McMahon. They were very reclusive. So anyway, to answer your question, no, we never heard any feedback from the other talk shows.
Interesting. Talk a little bit, you mentioned earlier a little bit about this, but talk about a production on the show and what a typical day was like. Because the show was on every night. It was on 5 nights a week.
Yes. We would come in Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We'd come at about 10 o'clock in the morning and rehearse till about 2, both shows, run through them. Come back at 4 and do them till about 7. We did Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We did 6 a week. And one day, Alan Thicke came in. He says, I find out our Monday shows aren't that lively because I think everyone's kind of relaxed after the weekend. So I'm going to move our shows, our taping days, to Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I laughed, and he says, no, I'm serious. I said, but still, we'll come in from a long weekend. But he was right. We came in, I guess Monday was a business day. But there was a wonderful schedule. I'm sure if they did it today, they'd find a way to do it in 12 hours. But we come in, I think Martin would come in a little early, 9 or 10 o'clock, rehearse his monologue. We'd rehearse the show. The actors would be there. Okay, you guys go away, come back at 4, rehearse show number 2. All right, you guys come back at 4:30, we'll do the show. And then at 7, we'd gear up and do it. It was just a wonderful schedule. And plus, when you're doing stuff and you don't have the script in front of you and there's improv, it keeps the actors on their toes. So you're not saying, what was that line? Let's go back and we run lines. Today a lot of shows, you have someone there to run lines with you and they do this setup and that setup and then move in from medium close-up, a full close-up, an over-the-shoulder until you're nuts. And 8 hours later you think the scene's over. Okay, now we got to pick up the scene from the side. So it was really a great, exhilarating pace.
And were you involved in the writing process at all beyond the improv that you did?
I don't think I was too much, but I would come in with ideas. No, they had a good set of writers. They had about 4 teams of writers who were just wonderful. Harry Shearer and Martin would write his monologue, which I would stand off to the side waiting to do my announce, and it would just knock me out. As I said, Martin once, for a couple of shows, appeared on the couch with a neck brace. He'd been in an accident, and he says, nobody knows the pain I'm in but my attorney and I. And I said, you just didn't see comedy like this at that time.
Absolutely. You mentioned the audience earlier. Was the audience of the show a real audience, or was it a fake audience?
I would say the first 30 shows, they brought in these people from Sunset Boulevard. They were, what you saw is what they were. They were ladies with shopping bags. They were old people. Do you want to see a TV show? They came in and reacted to it just like they would. I think later on it became the thing to see. They would get people, oh, how can we be in the audience? We got a younger, hipper crowd. But there was still not that many people. I'm a little vague on that, if the second season, if they filled the stands. But first season they'd have like 3 rows of people just sitting in chairs.
Right. What was the atmosphere like on the set amongst the cast and crew?
Great fun, a few actors. I always envied the casting woman because I said she saw every novelty act in Los Angeles. And a lot of these people would come on and they were kind of nervous. They were characters. We had the first person who designed a religious theme park. Before the Bakers. This was before the Bakers. We had a woman who'd been contacted from an extraspatial, outer space person. And they were a little nervous. A few people came on, like Kenny Mars, who played William W.D. Bud Price. He would come on with his funny thing. Tony Rolletti, who came on, he was a bad singer. I always introduced him as playing at a club. And when he's at a club, there's no need for reservations. And there's always plenty of seats. And he would laugh, and I'd say, "Is that a new toupee?" "You bet it is." So he would come on and we'd ad-lib with him. And so they were very free, but some of the actors you could tell were nervous that we'd have one rehearsal and then come back at 4 and we'll shoot it. And that's it? We're not going to run through it again? So as I say, we taped about 45, 50 minutes to pare it down to whatever it was then, 22, 25.
And did the novelty acts that were on, did they feel like they were part of the joke, or did they ever get sensitive about?
I don't think so. I think they just came on, and half the fun was they just did the show. They were out, like we were running out of time, so we'd have a singer and 2 tap dancers doing the same thing. They just came out. They were thrilled to be on TV, and they did it, which I think was half the fun.
Absolutely. Talk a bit more about Martin Mull. You guys had such amazing chemistry. What was it like working with him on the show?
Well, I'd first seen him. I went to see my friend Robert Klein at the Troubadour, and Martin Mull, I think, was opening for him. And I was just knocked out. I said, "This guy is doing humor. He doesn't hit easy targets." And I introduced myself to him at the end of at the show. Then when I found he was going to be the host, I said, "Well, that's great," because I really respected him. He was so funny. And he was just great to work with. I would suggest a joke. We'd go into a segment. I'd say, "Martin, near the end of the segment, I'm going to say so-and-so." And he'd be, looking at something, and I'd say, "Why don't you say this?" He'd say, okay. And at the end of the segment, I'd pull the joke, and he'd have the punchline right there. So I find you could never top him. He was great to work with. He was very supportive. He seemed to like me, so it was just great fun. I don't know if we'd done it 7 years, if by the 7th year I would say, he's starting to get on my nerves, but luckily or unluckily, we never went that long. It was not supposed to be done a second year. They were only supposed to do it a first year. But they got so many letters, and so many of Norman Lear's celebrity friends wanted to be on it, they said, "Let's do it a second year." And then after the second year, Norman left to do something else. And the new head of the network came on and said, "Well, it's in the black, it's making some money, but let's get rid of it. We want to do another show." And so they did another sitcom. I forget what it was. They wanted me to be on it, and I didn't like the role. I said, "No, I don't want to be on that role." And I forget the name of it.
Do you think that the change to America Tonight changed the tone of the show at all, or impacted the style of it?
I think maybe it did, but as most things, the first year was the truest because it's done in this little town in front of. The second year, you had celebrities, so you can't, people are going to tune in to see Charlton Heston and Carol Burnett and Joan Rivers. It just brought a bigger audience, I think. Some people might say, well, now it's more geared for them promoting a show, but still, it was. I think it was a good move, and if they did it again, they would have. I think they should have celebrities.
Yeah. A couple other recurring guest stars that were on the show a bit. Talk a bit about Dabney Coleman as Mayor Merle
Dabney
Jeter.
came on, yes, because he played the mayor of Fernwood. And I knew Dabney, and he was a tough guy. You had to talk to him a long time to get a real answer out of him. But we became very friendly. I remember once we were at some event, and I said to him, "Dabney, I got to I got to go to unemployment," because at the time he'd collect unemployment. And he looked at me and he says, unemployment. He says, what is that? And, I mean, he was just busting you, you know. He was a tough guy. But I always remember, what's that steakhouse in Beverly Hills that's so famous?
Morton's?
It's a little tiny place. It's tough to get in. It's packed. It's the guy's name.
Oh, Dan Tana's.
Dan Tana's. I ran into him at Dan Tana's. In fact, we ended up sitting together at the table, and he was with a girlfriend. And we started talking about baseball and Ted Williams. Before I knew it, he was standing up in the aisle among the tables, demonstrating Ted Williams' batting style and his follow-through. So he was a big baseball fan. But he was always funny when he came on the show. Because he came because he'd been very popular on Mary Hartman.
Right. And you spoke a little bit about Kenneth Mars, but talk about his role and what he was like.
Kenny had this wonderful character, William W.D. Bud Prize. He had a chin thing, chinodontia. He'd had a big chin, and he'd invented this thing that was going to pull his chin back. And that was funny. People remember that character. And he came on. He loved Dinah Shore. He referred to her. She's a big bone woman. I love her. And he created a table that's showing, it was earthquake time. We had a lot of earthquakes, and he showed how an earthquake worked and what happens in an earthquake. He said, of course, this is not the real thing. It's a stimulation. But we just loved him, and the writers loved him. And he became, anytime Kenny Mars came on. And then there was another favorite I loved, Rabbi, maybe you have it there.
I don't have that here. I don't have that, Rabbi.
I forget his name.
I'm so sorry I don't have it.
He was so wonderful. He was the rabbi, the Las Vegas rabbi. And two of the characters got married, and he conducted the marriage, and a month later they got divorced, and he came back to oversee the divorce.
Talk a little bit more about that. So that was Tony Rolletti's wedding, right?
Oh, was it Tony got married? Yes. Yeah. Chris Kattan, his father. Funny guy. He would say, Shalom and Bocha. He would come on, Shalom and Bocha. And one day I asked him, I said, what does that mean? He says, absolutely nothing. And then I have lines like, you know, the rabbi might be hungry, but we should get him a ham sandwich and a glass of milk. That was the joy with Jerry Hubbard, because Jerry Hubbard didn't know. You know, may I have a ham sandwich? I love a ham sandwich and a glass of milk. Offer it to the rabbi. And a lot of people might think that's great. Oh, wait a minute, you can't have that for the rabbi. But yeah, I think it was Tony Rolletti got married, and the rabbi was there, and he conducted the ceremony. And I thought it was so funny that a month later they were getting divorced, and he came back. No, you know, I'm sorry, this didn't work out. He was just that was his job. We oversaw the divorce of these two young people.
Jim Varney was also a guest, regular on the show.
Yeah.
Talk about him.
Jim Varney was his southern character, and I think everyone remembers him. He had a motorhome that was battery operated, and that was something great at the time. And he got in to demonstrate to start the car, and the motorhome wouldn't start. So let's find out, the battery must be dead. And he opened the hood, there were like 800 little batteries there, and he had to check every one to see which battery had gone dead. But he was a good character. They usually wrote for him, but he would pick up the stuff and just carry it and ad lib, and he was another one of our favorites.
By the way, Kip King.
Kip King. Oh, I loved Kip, and he passed away early last year. He was he played the rabbi. Shecky Stein, Rabbi Shecky Stein. Shecky Stein, and the pleasure is mine. Because at the time there was Shecky Green, who's still around. And he had one of those cliche names, Shecky, and everyone thought, oh, Shecky Green, he must be a hack. One of the funniest comedians you'd ever seen. He influenced me, great, Shecky Green. But he was Shecky Stein, yes, it's all coming back.
Who were some of the other comedians that influenced you?
My friend Robert Klein influenced me greatly. I loved his take, the way, it's just that kind of stream of reality. As a kid, I was influenced by the movies Bob Hope, Red Skelton, Abbott and Costello. because they would suddenly stop and maybe turn to the camera and address the audience in the theater. And this is something I'd never seen before. When Bob Hope and Bing Crosby would do a movie, and you could tell they'd have inside jokes back and hey, I just love that, because up until that time, if you saw comedians, it was the Ritz Brothers maybe, or John, Hell's a Poppin'. But it was it really influenced me as a kid, and I think I thought that's what I'd like to be. Bob Hope was so brash and so funny, and hey, how about that? And he'd see his ex-girlfriend had a baby, and the baby, you'd see, you look in the crib, and it was Bob Hope's face on the baby, and or whichever it was. But it just knocked me out as a little kid that they could do that.
Right. In 1976, America Tonight came to an end.
Uh-huh.
So you said that was always planned, that it
was only supposed to be on one season, then they did it a second season, and it could have gone on, but the new network head thought it was... McLean Stevenson did a show, and he was a wonderful guy. I forget the name of it, but they wanted me to be on it, and I didn't... I think the computer came up with it there.
No, actually, the computer handed me something else.
Okay.
During the course of the show, was there a lot of censorship? Were there things you wanted to do that you were told you couldn't?
On Fun with Tonight?
Yeah.
Not really. The only time we had a problem was one of the earliest shows. The little girl, Baby Irene, was on, and we had a wonderful character. He was a comic actor. His skill was he could play the piano backwards, which is a real skill. But on our show, they had him in an iron lung, and they had him playing the piano backwards. And of course, he was on several times, and Martin introduced him as the laid-back piano styling. And Baby Irene was on. She was a little girl. She was so cute. She was like a little Shirley Temple. She referred to us, we said something about women, and she said we were both like Chauvinov's pigs. But you never knew what she was going to say. So we came out of a commercial once, and this guy had been playing piano backwards, and we came out of a commercial, and you heard, and you cut over the guy that was in the iron lung, and Baby Irene had pulled the plug on his iron lung and was dancing and holding up the plug, and I started to laugh. I mean, it was hilarious, and all of a sudden Norman Lear was there. This is one of the first shows. Cut! Hold it! We can't do this! Now, when someone tells you can't do something, you start to laugh even more. This is politically incorrect, and I see what he meant now. This was terrible. No, but Norman, it's funny, but this went on for a half hour. I don't remember ever laughing so hard. And I think what they had to do, they did away with her pulling the plug, but she was just tap dancing next to the guy. And that was one of the funniest things about the show. There'd be this little girl tap dancing, completely clueless that a guy was in an iron lung. That's the only time I remember where anyone said, no, you can't do that.
And do you remember ever being asked to do something that went too far and you said you didn't want to do it?
Yes, and I don't even know if I should have this on. They had a thing to focus in on the camera. It was just a body with a head, no legs and no arms. Do you know what the story is? Are you okay? So at the time, well, I'll tell you what the line was. Martin says, we're coming out of a commercial, and Martin says, ladies and gentlemen, Toady Fields. Now, at the time, Toady Fields, it was famous she'd lost a leg. And I said, Martin, I don't think you should do that. I think I think that any censorship, I would have to say to Martin, I don't think you should do that. Martin didn't really have a cap on what he could say. And sometimes I'd actually call the producer over and say, Martin wants to say something, so I don't want to tell him not to. Would you say something to him? So we'd get together, Martin, don't do that. I think it's a little tasteless. That's the only time I remember me saying it was a little too much.
And did he do it or not?
He did not do it.
So talk about shooting the final episode. Do you remember that day?
I don't remember, but I think it was something where I came on. It was very interesting. They did a split screen. I came on as myself. I think we had a special guest on the show. Jerry Hubbard introduced one of my favorite actors, Fred Willard, and Martin Mull. Barth Kimball said, "Well, I have one of my favorite performers, Martin Mull." And if I remember, I haven't seen it in a long time, but we came on as ourselves and were interviewed. And I remember watching that, and I said, I like Jerry Hubbard better than I like myself. Jerry had this kind of freewheeling attitude, and I came on, like most actors, I'm currently appearing in so-and-so, and yes, it's a pleasure to be on the show. But Jerry was just so much fun. And I should rewatch that episode again. I think I'm not sure if that was the last one, but it was one of them they did.
That's great. Were you ready for the show to end by the time it was over?
I guess so. I at the time, to me, one show ended, another show started. I loved doing it. I think it was my favorite experience. One of my most favorite experiences. I loved working with Martin. I loved the characters, but they weren't going to do it. And what are you going to do? Okay, we'll move on. It didn't end in 76. I think it ended in 78.
Did it end in 78?
I think so. It was on 77, 78.
Okay.
Because I'd done Sorota's Court in 76, a few years before that. And then the next thing, I don't know if you have that prepared, I was in my house one day and the phone rang. And I answered it. "Fred?" I said, "Yeah, this is George Schlatter." I said, "No, wait, it's not George Schlatter. I mean, laughing, George Schlatter." "Fred, we're doing this show called Real People. And we're doing all these wacky people. And I loved you on Fernwood Tonight, and I love the way you could talk to these crazies and make them appear normal." I said, "Well, that's the only way you have to do it. Someone who's a little off the charts, you don't want to say, 'Wow, are you wacky?' You talk to them and try to find, I'd love you to be on the show. It's called Real People. I think it's going to revolutionize television." And again, I said, "Well, I don't know, George. I guess I'd done some show, a pilot or something. But come on down." So I did it. We did 6 the first season. And he really revolutionized television. He started the whole magazine format. We had screen tests from actors. We did stories, feel-good stories. We did stories about zany people. He would send me out to cover the extreme, crazy people. But after the first 6 shows, I decided I didn't want to do it anymore for some reason. And I left the show. And then I did a few other things. And eventually, I saw a story about a baseball player I remember from the 40s named Pete Gray, who had only one arm. He played in the major leagues one season. And I read a story about where he was still around in Pennsylvania playing golf. And I went in to see George. I said, "I'd like to come back to cover that story, to talk to this guy." He was like 60, 70 years old, and he was playing golf. And George said, "Gee, that's great." And then it turned out the guy didn't want to be interviewed. But George says, "I'd love you to come back and do like half a season." So I went back and I did 11 more, and I had a great show. I don't know I didn't want to do anymore, but that's all. I did like 11 more and had a great time. I'm still very friendly with George Schlatter. I see him and he still talks about some of the stories I did.
Do you remember some of the other stories?
I remember a lot of them. What he always remembers is well, I remember one spaceship. Frank, a man had built a spaceship in his garage, and he was going to fly up to Venus, and he was deadly serious. This was not a spoof. He was not laughing. And I interviewed him, just deadly serious. I said, "Now, how long will it take to get to Venus?" He says, "Well, not that far. First, we're going to fly around the world and land, and then go to Venus, and we'll circle Venus, and we'll land on Venus." And I said, "You don't have any chairs inside." It was almost as big as this room. He built it himself. He's an ex-Navy man. He said, "Well, I'll put a few folding chairs in there." And George remembered, and I always thought that would make a great movie, that I'd come back to visit him a year later and see this spaceship going up to Venus. But he was completely serious.
So what tone did you have if they were completely serious and you had come from this irreverent Fernwood Tonight show, which sounds like part of the reason George...
I said, now, where are you going to go, and how long did you work on it? I didn't want to make fun of him. I talked. What George seems to remember mostly is a guy who had a perpetual motion machine, and I went down and it didn't seem to work, and I just said, "Now, if it did work, what would the point of this be?" I went to do a story on a woman who had a cow that talked. And we drove up to Sacramento. We flew out of Sacramento and drove to her farm, and I was really excited. And I came up, I said, I understand you have a talking cow. She said, well, he was talking up until about a week ago. And I said, uh-oh. So she says, he'll talk when he's hungry. He'll say, I want food. Feed me. I said, okay. So we went up the cow. She said, are you hungry? And he just looked. He says, okay, here's some food. I said, well, don't throw him the food. Let's get him to talk. So we were leaving, and I did the whole story on the angle of talking to the cow, saying you should talk. Really, we're on NBC. Millions of people watch this show, and it could be your big break. I try to do it seriously. So we went back, and we were loading up the truck, and she says, you know, a UFO landed on the farm about a month ago. And our producer stopped, and he said, we'll get that story another time. We packed up and left. And I came home, and my wife said, how'd the day go? I said, I'm a little disappointed the cow didn't talk. She said, you didn't expect it to talk, did you? And I said, yes, I did.
Did you?
I did kind of hope that there'd be something the cow would say, hello. Because I always have a feeling that I don't know why animals can't talk. They're around us so much, you'd think they would learn how to speak. You know, hello. Every once in a while you see on YouTube a cat saying, Merry Christmas. But they don't, you don't want them to explore that a little more.
Someday.
I would like a mouse.
Do you think people were as media savvy back then as they are now?
No. Now everybody knows about, how much what movie grossed, what's popular, who's making how much on a show, where they shoot a show. I mean, when I was a kid, nobody knew what was a hit movie. Yeah, on Saturday you went to the movies. You liked it. You know, that was it. Today, you already know if you like a movie before it comes out. It's a bomb. It opens in 4 weeks. It's a bomb. And I asked my grandson a couple of years ago, I said, how do people know, how do kids know what do they want to see? I guess that's on the internet, you know, you hear rumors. And I just did a movie in Windsor, Ontario, about 3 weeks ago, and someone said, oh yeah, I just saw some footage of that. I said, what? It's already on the internet. They're showing previews. I guess they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk a little bit about your co-host. Talk about Sarah Purcell.
Well, Sarah, I remember her. She was a co-host of some shows. I think she was one of Regis Philbin's co-hosts. I think she was one of the reasons I agreed to do Real People. I thought she was great. She was so pretty and so wonderful and so charming. And my wife still says, you only did that because of Sarah. And they've since become very good friends. They both work on a charity called Big Brothers Big Sisters, so we're very friendly. But she was very jealous that I did it just because I thought Sarah was so pretty. But she was wonderful. She was a wonderful hostess. She was the only woman on the show, and that was part of her contract, that there were no other women on the show. And I think I heard, I don't think I'm speaking out of school, that George Schlatter would only pay everyone so much money, but Sarah wanted more money about the third season. And NBC said to him, George, Sarah wants so much more than the others because she's the only woman on the show and she's a big attraction. And George says, well, then you pay her. But she was on through the whole show and she was the big attraction.
And what about Skip Stevenson?
Skip was funny. He was a loose cannon. I didn't know this. He got fired so many times from the show. I was never part of this, but he got fired about 3 or 4 times during the day. He'd always say something inappropriate or insult someone, or say out loud, let's get out of here. These people are nitwits. But he was still fun, and I loved him. But he was tough to talk to. You'd have to talk to him for about 5 minutes before you could really get a real... So seriously, how are you feeling, Skip? Oh, okay, I got this little thing. But everything was a bit, a one-liner. Hey, my wife... yeah, he was a lot of fun.
So did you mentioned coming up with the story idea for the baseball player, but did you come up with the other story? Did you come up with the people you wanted to interview, or were they assigned?
No, they had tons of them. They did. I mean, by this time, people were writing in stories, and they would present them to me. And George would send me always on kind of the weirder stories because he knew the weirder these people were. I mean, he wouldn't send me so much on a patriotic story. But some guy who lived in a purple house and everything was purple and all his food was purple. and his wife was dressed in purple. He'd send me out to talk to him.
In 1978, you hosted Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, that was a. I think how that came about. I saw the first show, and it knocked me out. I said, God, this is wonderful comedy, and I knew John Belushi. I don't know how I'd known him, but I knew him. I didn't know Dan Aykroyd or the others. And one night, shortly after, I was sitting in the Improv, and John Belushi walked in, and I walked up to him and I said, John, I love your new show. He said, oh, thanks. He was kind of. I said, come on, John. And I took him around the Improv. Everyone, this is John Belushi. You got to watch his show, Saturday Night Live. And he was, I could tell he was so impressed by that. And they had an Emmy show out in L.A. And Lorne Michaels and all of them were at a table. And my wife said, go up and talk to them. I said, I don't want to, go up and talk to them. So I went over and I said, hi, I'm Fred Willard. I love your show. Oh, Fred, I think they all love Fernwood Tonight. And a couple of weeks later, I got a call. I think Muhammad Ali was supposed to host the show and dropped out. And they said, we'd love you to host it. And I said, oh, my God, that would be wonderful. And I have a feeling John Belushi was behind it. You got to use Fred Willard. So I went in. I must have written 20 sketches, 20 ideas to do. I took it very seriously. And I went in, and John Belushi wasn't there the first day, and he wasn't there the second day. And the third day, they said, Fred, John Belushi's on the phone. So I go, hi, John, where are you? Oh, I'm down here. Don't let him work you too hard, Fred. How are you doing? Make sure they treat you right. So it was a big thrill. And to think that so many millions of people are watching you, I think you get nervous to a point and then finally say, you can't get nervous anymore. And I just went out and did it. And it was a wonderful, memorable night. I did had some great stuff. They wrote some great stuff for me.
Did any of the sketches you wrote make it to air? Do you remember?
I don't remember, and I don't think so. They let me do my own monologue. I did my Elvis impression because they kept coming up with stuff for me to do, which I didn't like, and they kind of left me drifting till about the last day. Lorne Michaels kept saying, we're going to protect you. And I finally said, look, I got to know what you want me to do. So I did this whole thing in the rehearsal. I did some jokes. And then Lorne came up and he said, standards and practices may not let you do that. And I said, standards and practices? I didn't know you had standards and practices. So I kind of remember what I did. And they did some great sketches for me. Some of them I don't remember till I see it. One that everyone remembers is the Scotch Tape Boutique, where Gilda Radner and I opened up a little store that only sold Scotch tape. And I just loved it. And it just sat there during the dress rehearsal to silence. And then in between, they asked me it was between that and another one, which one I wanted to do. I said, we got to do the Scotch Tape Boutique, because they had two of them. I think John Belushi and his friend came in. Do you have videotapes? No, just Scotch tape. You see, I told you so. And they laughed. And my wife was so sad, Gilda, that she knew that but she was very faithful to me. If you believe in it, I believe in it. So it was one of the most memorable sketches that I'd ever done.
And talk about working with that cast.
They were kind of tough. Some tough. I think they wanted me to work. Tuesday night was the all-night session. I said, no, I don't want to work all night. I was going down to see Tim Curry at the Bottom Line because I was a big fan. So someone got me tickets and I went down. I was you're not going to work all night? No, I want to go down and see Tim Curry. Then one night we were working late, like a Wednesday night, and my wife loves to tell this story. There's Bill Murray and a few people were working, and the phone. No, it was that night. It was a Tuesday night, and Bill Murray picked up the phone. And all I heard was, "Don't bother us here." Hung up. The phone rang about 20 minutes later. What? Who? No, don't bother us here. We're working. And all of a sudden I thought, I don't like this. That's my wife calling, because she's only had the number. So funny. Don't bother. Who? Oh, hi. I'm sorry. Yeah, Fred's right here. So I got on, and Mary says, who the hell was I? I said, well, it's Bill Murray. He's doing a bit. She says, well, we got tickets to see Tim Curry. I said, okay. So I told him, I said, guys, I have to leave here at 10 o'clock. We're going on to see the show. So he would do things like that. Now, then they had a closing night party. And I said to Gilda Radner, well, it's great. She says, oh, everyone has their own clique. I said, well, it's nice that they give you a closing night party, the show. She's, no, they don't throw it. We throw our own closing night party. So we went down to some place on Fifth Avenue, number 1 Fifth Avenue, and each cast member sat at their own table. Gilda was here, Bill Murray was there, who was the musical group? It was, I'm blanking on a lot of names.
Was it Devo?
Devo, who I just loved. They came into a table and they all sat cross-legged, in a lotus position, and the restaurant wouldn't serve them food for some reason because it was too late. And I remember I should have taken a stand and this is Devo. But it was a wonderful experience. I loved it.
Excellent. We're obviously the TV Academy, so we don't go too deep into your film career,
okay.
But we obviously wanted to speak with you about some of your movies, and so we thought we'd focus on the improvisational films that you've done.
Wow, yeah.
So we wanted to start with talking about your experience on Spinal Tap.
Yes, my agent called and they said, Rob Reiner called, and he and Harry Shearer and them have this movie. Spinal Tap is about a heavy metal group, and they come to an Air Force base, and you're the officer at the Air Force base who greets them. And I said, oh, I'm going to be this jerk. They're going to be a hip group. I said, no, I don't want to do it. So he said, no, they really want to talk to you. I said, Irvin, I just don't want to do that. It's, I'm tired of playing characters where I'm always this square guy. He says, why don't you just go out and talk to them? I said, okay. I knew Harry Shearer. I kind of knew Rob Reiner. And I went out, and they said, look, Rob and Harry are out to lunch, but they want you to watch this little 6 or 7 minute tape they've made. So I said, okay. So I watched it, and it was so extraordinary. I said, I can't believe that they're improvising, and these are not real people. So Rob and Harry Shearer came back from lunch. I said, I've got to be in this movie. They said, okay, well, we should talk to your agent about money and bill. I said, no, I don't care about it. Just, I want to be in the movie. So I went down and I did the movie. I did the scene, and they did about 3 takes from my point of view, the group coming in. It was all improvised. Then they turned one around on me, and it just whatever came up, came up. I felt kind of free because I knew Michael McKean, I knew Harry Shearer. I didn't know Chris Guest that much, but I knew who he was. And then Rob Reiner said, now, Fred, later today there's another scene where they're performing, and they send out a laser beam or something, want to get a shot of you in the audience ducking. And I said, well, Rob, my mom is in town, and I'm not spending that much time with her. I didn't know where this movie was ever going to be seen. I said, it's just as soon, I did this scene, let me go home. Oh, sure, okay. So by the time it came out, I don't even know if it was that popular when it first came out. But it sure was. It was recently voted the #1 rock and roll movie of all time, which is great to be in. And, of course, that led to me being in a lot of his Christopher Guest's other movies. So it was an afternoon well spent. Not that much of an afternoon. I had to get home to see my mom, who, God bless her, passed away since then. So.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. You had some military experience growing up. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And well, did you tap into that at all for that role?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. My mother had remarried after my father passed away, so she sent me to a place called Kentucky Military Institute. When the selling point of that is it was in Louisville, Kentucky, but after Christmas, the whole school moved down to Venice, Florida for 3 months. And I said, that looks like the kind of place I'd like to go to. So it was really fun. It was not too heavily military, and it was not as difficult a school as the original high school I went to, which was like a college. And so I went to this Kentucky Military Institute. Then when time to go to college, I said I was kind of comfortable in this place, and I don't know if I could be the kind of guy who goes to frat houses and all. So I found this place called Virginia Military Institute, and I said, I think I'll go there. It's kind of structured and all. And I went there, and boy, it was not what I expected. It was too tough. It's called the West Point of the South, and I spent the first years trying to get out of it and go to another school. But I liked sports. I played sports. I ran cross country, I ran track, I played on the baseball team. And if you go to another school, yeah, you lose a year of eligibility. It would have meant going to college for 5 years. So I just stuck it out, and then went into the Army. At the time, it was you had to go in. It was a draft, and I went in as an enlisted man because I didn't care for the military. And I said I can't go in and give orders to people. So I served 2 years, and I went to Germany. I played on the baseball team, got to travel all around Germany. So it was a great experience. But by this time, I didn't, the military stuff. I was fed up with. So when they asked me to do this Spinal Tap, I knew the military sensibility. So it was right there. The guy's trying to fit in. He was the entertainment director. He wanted to seem like a regular guy. My hair's a little long. I need a haircut. I can't stand too close to you because they'll think I'm part of the band. So that's where I pulled on.
It's perfect. So talk next about the Christopher Guest films in general. How did he first approach you to be in the first film?
I got a call, Christopher Guest. He said, come on down and talk to me. And I said, sure. And I went down to his office. He said, we're doing this movie. I think it's going to be called Waiting for Guffman. I said, that's a strange title. He said, it's going to be completely improvised. There's no script. So my first thought was, gee, that's great. Because the toughest part about being in a movie is learning the lines. And he said, you're the first person I've asked to be in it. I said, oh, gee, that's wonderful. He said, we're trying to get Catherine O'Hara. We'll have Eugene Levy. He says, I ran the idea past my friend Marty Short. And I said, uh-huh. And he says, Marty said he loved it. He says, let's do it. And he said, I had to tell Marty, no, we want people who aren't well known. So that brought me down a notch. So, okay, so I left. He says, I'll call you later. So I was walking to my car. I said, gee, I don't have to memorize lines. And I said, oh, but wait a minute. I'm going to have to come up with my own lines. So what it is, we went to Austin, Texas, and we did it. And there was pretty much of a script, 10 or 12 pages outlining exactly what the show was. We had to learn songs. We had to learn dances, which was the most difficult thing. They hired a choreographer for us. We went, when we had any downtime, we'd go to the dance studio and learn these dances. And it was a wonderful experience. It was the first one at the time. And it was about an acting troupe in this town in Missouri. And so as an actor, you take to it, and I loved it. And they didn't know what they had, Castle Rock, for a long time, and it didn't come out for a long time. But when it did, it got a very much of a cult following, and that enabled him to do the next one, which is, I think, Best in Show.
Right. Which
was more commercial, and again, completely improvised. It was more commercial, and it was edited and brought out a little quicker.
Let's back up to Guffman for a second. We wanted to ask specifically about your Ron and Sheila's audition, because it's one of our favorite scenes in a movie of all time. So you said that was actually choreographed.
Yes. Not so much. I came up with the idea that it should be a Taster's Choice commercial. Because I think these actors, I don't know if you remember that commercial. They were kind of British, and it was a series of them. Taster's Choice. Maybe I'll drop around your house around 11 o'clock and we'll have some, I forget what it was, but I thought these actors would think that was the ultimate in acting. And so I said, why don't we do that as the scene? So Chris Guest wanted to do Midnight at the Oasis because he'd gone to school with a fellow who wrote that. So we combined it together. And the audition scene, we sat out in the foyer, and what you see is what you had. We were sitting out there, we did our scenes, and when the time we rehearsed the musical number, Midnight at the Oasis, and we opened the door and we walked in, it was like a real audition. There was Bob Balaban sitting there, there was Christopher Guest, there were a few more people. That whole scene was improvised. We did it twice. And Bob Balaban just could look at me, and he scared me to death. I said, he doesn't like us. I came up with the line about, shall we strike the chair? Because, again, this is one of the terms Ron had thought of, and he wanted to impress everyone with his knowledge of acting. So it was scary. It was like a real audition.
And talk about your chemistry with Catherine O'Hara.
before the movie, I'd contacted her. We were playing husband and wife. I called her a couple of times. I said, Catherine, we should get together and talk about our background, where we met. And I never heard from her. And the first time we were on the set, we had to do our interviews. After a few of the shots, she said, Fred, maybe we should take some time to talk about our characters. She's kind of elusive. She's a wonderful boy to work with. It's great. We had a lot of fun doing that scene. It was my idea. Chris asked us to come up with a hobby, because a lot of the movie was inside. Let's come up with something outdoors. I'm a big baseball fan, and I'm a fan of the history of baseball, and I'm very taken up with I think it was 1960 World Series, the Pittsburgh Pirates, where the guy hit a game-winning home run, and I'd like to reenact that. So I had the idea of making my wife throw me a wiffle ball, and I had a wiffle back and hitting the home run. And the first pitch, and she played it drunk. She didn't want to get up and pitch. Come on, honey, let's do it. So she pitched me the wiffle ball, and luckily I nailed it. And unfortunately, Chris left all those things out of the original movie, but he put them in the DVD. And someone gave me a review that I hung on my wall, saying it was one of the high points of the DVD was Fred Willard's reenactment of the World Series game. So I was tickled about that.
It is a highlight for sure. In Best in Show, how did that work? Did they film the entire movie and then you did your part, or? They
filmed the dog show part, and Jim Pittick and I came in, and the first day they dressed us in tux, and they're going to have the electronic press kit. And then they showed us the footage of what they'd filmed of the dogs coming through and the woman being attacked by the dog. And then they said to us, now, would you like to do the EPK thing now or wait till you'd filmed? And Jim Pittick looked at me and said, well, if I don't know about Fred, but I just as soon do it now since we're dressed for it, because Jim had flown in from London. He was doing a series there all the way into Vancouver. And that night in the hotel room, he called me and says, Fred, they don't have us on the schedule tomorrow. I bloody well have to be back in London on Thursday. So they scheduled us, they got us in on Wednesday, and they moved all the extras around behind us, and they filmed us sitting there. And we weren't watching anything, but Chris would come up and say, now here's the scene where the sporting dogs come in. Here's the scene, remember you saw this. Here's the scene. So we have to just make it up, and Jim Pittick was so real that to this day people say he's a real Westminster dog show, right? I said, no, he didn't know anything more about dogs than I did. And Chris did about one long take, and then he moved in a little for another long take. We did it about 4 or 5 hours, and that was it. And that was the end of Jim. He flew back to London. And I had 2 more scenes that I did like on the Thursday night and then on Friday. But that was it.
Amazing. And then in Mighty Wind, you created the character of Mike Fontaine.
Yes.
Talk about developing that character.
Chris told me, he said, what your character is, you managed one of these groups, and you own a comedy club, a music club. And I said, I think it would be more, add a little note of interest if this guy had a theatrical background himself. And I said, it might be funny if he'd have been on a series for 1 season, a very unsuccessful series, but he thought everyone remembered it. And they had the catchphrase, hey, what happened? And the series was called What Happened? So I thought of that and a couple other catchphrases, and I just built on what Chris had asked me to do. And I sat down, the first thing I did was the shot of me setting up all the groundwork. And then I think it was my idea to dye my hair blonde, because you saw some 90s rock
Can I actually
group.
stop you, because we ran out of tape at the very end, and we'll